Would you believe me if I told you that this person was a qualified medical doctor? Don't you think he looks a little bit young? His name is Malachi Love-Robinson, and he was formerly known as Dr. Love. When he was 17, he fooled the entire state of Florida into thinking that he was a qualified medical doctor. That's right. He said he was a qualified medical doctor, and he was even involved in obstetrics and gynecological examinations. And this just scratches the surface as to what this guy did. The more I looked into it, the more I was just shocked by what actually happened, so I will be covering this story today. Hi, my name's Yasmin, and I make weekly videos about topics that are scary, disturbing, or true crime. If you'd like to follow along, then please subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. I just want to say before we start that it is raining quite hard. I'm not sure if my microphone can pick it up or not, but I'm very sorry if you can hear that in the background. Hopefully it stops soon. Anyway, let's get on with it. Malachi Love-Robinson was born in 1997, and he was brought up by his grandparents who homeschooled him, and his ultimate dream was to become a medical doctor. Instead of going through the traditional route, of going to university, obtaining a degree, Malachi thought, he could just fast track this. He just wants some hands-on experience, and he was ready for the real world. So this meant that in 2015, he applied for a job as a doctor at St. Mary's Medical Center in Palm Beach, Florida, and he got the job. Malachi would spend over a month working full-time as an MD at this practice. He'd go in and out of patient rooms like it was nobody's business. He would shadow other doctors to apparently develop his training. And he basically wore the whole get-up. He sported a lab coat that had all the sort of credentials on his top, so it said his name, Dr. Love, and then anesthesiology underneath it, and it was all embroidered and beautiful. He had like a stethoscope, and he just walked around the place like he owned it. He just went under the radar the entire time, until one day. One day, a pregnant patient made an appointment at the clinic, and Malachi just waltzed into the patient room after getting consent from the patient that it was okay to apparently shadow an OBGYN. The doctor looked up at him, and he thought that Malachi looked strangely young. Like he'd seen Malachi in the past, but he didn't actually realize how young Malachi looked. Like he looked like a child. And he sort of asked him, why do you have a lab coat on that says anesthesiology on it? It doesn't really match up with the fact that he's taking appointments for, obstetrics and gynecology. So the doctor was very suspicious, and he actually immediately called the police, saying that there was something going on. He thinks that Malachi is impersonating a medical doctor. And according to a police report, he did insist that he was a medical doctor. So he got questioned about this, and he was like, yes, I've been practicing for years. But he kind of got away with it because he didn't actually treat patients or prescribe anything to patients while he was at this medical center. In addition to this, St. Mary's Medical Center just decided not to press any charges. And I think it's technically because he didn't do anything wrong, but it also kind of covers them as well in terms of their reputation. But naturally, he left this job because it was just a little bit too awkward working there still, plus they wouldn't let him work there. And instead he opened up his own business. And this business was called the New Birth, New Life Medical Center. Now, he opened this up with a business partner, and the whole premise of this New Birth, New Life Medical Center was to provide naturopathic healthcare, and I believe mainly focusing on mental health. Here, Malachi would go to work, and he would advise patients and provide treatments for people who were struggling with ADHD, drug addiction, and various psychotic disorders. So it was not to be treated lightly. Keep in mind, he's only 18 years old at the time and still has no qualifications whatsoever. On the New Birth, New Life Medical Center website thing, there's like all these testimonials about Dr. Love and how he's so helpful and how great the center was, but plastered all over the website as well was Malachi's name, followed by all his credentials. So it included MD ND and PhD. So MD being medical doctor, ND being naturopathic doctor, which by the way isn't formally regulated in the state of Florida, and PhD. So it didn't stop there. He didn't have just one PhD, he had multiple PhDs apparently. The opening of his practice seemed very suspicious to people that knew Malachi, especially his sort of extended family members. They were happy for him for being so successful, but also they knew that there was no way he could obtain all these qualifications and only be 18 years old. So he was basically lying to the public. Police and reporters received an anonymous tip, most likely from one of these extended family members who voiced their concerns, and things started to slowly fall apart for Malachi. You'd think that from Malachi's first job, his employers would ask for some sort of credentials, maybe a birth certificate or some form of identification, and they absolutely did do this. But maybe you're wondering, what about the birth date? Did this not give it away that he was far too young to even be a doctor? But Malachi had an answer for everything, and this was his answer. He said that as a child, he was extremely unwell and he had to leave the States for a prolonged period of time for treatment. When he arrived back into the States, I think he registered for ID or something, but they accidentally wrote down his date of arrival instead of his date of birth, so it was off by about 10 years, and apparently he hasn't been able to correct this ever since. Surprisingly, the company actually believed this. But so what about the credentials? How did he fabricate the credentials that he had? He said he's never claimed to be an MD, and all the signage of his business and everything online that was marketed was just put there by mistake, saying that people who made the websites and the building manager of his business assumed that he was a medical doctor, and so they put the MD on there without asking him. This was proven not to be the case though, because there's email evidence revealing that he actually asked these people to put that MD on after his name. So if he never technically claimed to be a medical doctor, why did he go by doctor then? That leads us on to the PhDs, and he can technically be called a doctor because of his PhDs, but obviously they're fake. One of his PhDs was from a church program where he only paid $30 to get a fake certificate saying that he's got a PhD in theology. He got another one made online again, and that stated that he had a PhD in psychology from the University of Arizona. Now, as for the naturopath certificate, he applied for this one online through the American Alternative Medical Association, and he paid around $285 for this one. Now, these companies don't check your application beforehand, so they don't really check to see that anything is legitimate. You basically just send them your details, and they get it all prepped for you and print out this official looking certificate. As I mentioned, the naturopathic medicine is not actually regulated by Florida, so technically he is allowed to do this and isn't required to have any sort of training to open up his own business in this field. This isn't all that he did though, it keeps going. In order to make the down payment on the business, to rent the property, to provide the salary of the actual medical doctors that work there, and to buy all the equipment, he stole $30,000 from a vulnerable 80-year-old patient by forging checks that eventually cleared out her entire bank account. Luckily for the public though, everything came crashing down in 2016, and this was all due to an anonymous tip that the police received, and so what they did was they just sent an undercover cop to act as a patient. Now, Dr. Love continued to do physical examinations on them, and this was proof that he was actually treating patients, and he was lying to patients saying that he was a real medical professional. So he was arrested for practicing medicine without a license and stealing from a patient. He ended up pleading guilty and was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. Fast forward to 2020, where he was actually released from prison and he had an opportunity to start his life all over again. He started working as a salesperson for a company called United States of Freight, which is such a cool name, by the way. I don't know if it's like a popular company in the States, but I love that name. Anyway, it's a shipping company. And basically what he'd do is he would get clients to make payments into his own personal bank account. So he was directly stealing from the business. For this, he was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months in prison. So he got sent back there. After all of this, Malachi still wants to become a medical doctor, and he truly believes that he's going to get there. Although I'm pretty sure that a conviction will stop you from applying for medical school. I'm not really sure. That's the case in New Zealand anyway. I'm not sure about the States. But let's hope he's never in a position to become a doctor, because it sounds like he would be a public health risk. His grandparents have never stopped supporting him throughout this whole ordeal. And they say that, yeah, he's made a few mistakes. He can be forgiven. But personally, I feel like he should have had a longer sentence, because he's essentially putting patients' lives at risk. He's putting patients' lives in his own hands. And if he was able to get away with it for so long, I think he would have actually cost a patient their lives. In addition to this, I think it's really clear that he hasn't really changed, and that there's something definitely psychologically going on there, because he feels the need to lie and steal. It's quite interesting to me that, like, when you watch his interviews and you listen to the way he speaks, he's very well spoken, and he's actually quite sweet in a way, which is slightly more disturbing because he was able to commit these crimes. Let me know what you think, and whether you agree with the fact that he basically got a slap on the wrist for doing all of this. And that was the case of Malachi Love-Robinson. If you got all the way to this part of the video, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and I post every single week, so I will see you next week. Bye.